Facebook admits their fact checkers are frauds. That's right. In this video, we're going to take a look at the astonishing admission in court that Facebook fact checkers are indeed nothing more than left-wing activists. We're going to see how this admission completely undermines the whole notion of fact-checking to begin with, and stick with me to the very end of this video when I'll reveal how Facebook's admission explains virtually everything we've been experiencing these last 2 insane years. You are not going to want to miss this. Greetings, everyone. Dr. Stevie with you. Great to be with you. As always, I am your daily fake news antidote. As each and every day, I provide patriotic analysis to help you to think better so you can feel better in these crazy and turbulent and fraudulent times. So make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. And gang, around here, we are saying Merry Christmas loud and clear. And there's no better way to do that than joining together for a patriotic Christmas party. I invite you to join me next Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern for the Turley Talks Christmas Party live stream. I'll be joined by some special guests. We'll play some games. I'll be answering some questions and discussing all the things I can't talk about here. You're going to absolutely love it. Reserve your spot for our Christmas party today by clicking on the link below. There is a ticket fee, but not if you're part of our Change America program. So click below, sign up now to join us for this special event, and come even for free. I can't wait to see you there. All right, gang, let's dive right in here. I don't know. Is it just me, or does the world of big tech feel like it's beginning to implode? I did a video just last week on the incredible fall of Jack Dorsey, who, of course, announced his resignation from Twitter. You've got did you see this? Russian President Vladimir Putin vowing to basically destroy Facebook's left-wing news algorithm. You got all kinds of tech-lash bills across the nation where lawmakers, by the way, of both parties, interestingly enough, both Democrats and Republicans, in dozens of state houses across the country, they're proposing new regulations related to antitrust, consumer privacy, app store fees, and taxes on digital ad sales. And now we actually have Facebook admitting that their so-called fact-checking is actually a bunch of utter and complete nonsense. This is all thanks to a lawsuit brought by the celebrated journalist John Stossel, who's exposed the left's supposed battle against, quote, misinformation as a complete and total farce. Now, what happened is that Stossel posted a pair of videos that challenged liberal orthodoxy on the environment. And it was interesting because the videos apparently didn't even question whether climate change is real or not. Instead, they talked about other issues such as forest management and using technology to adapt and the like. And yet, the third party that Facebook contracts to review its video and blog content, a company known as Science Feedback, flagged both videos as, quote, false. Now, apparently Science Feedback didn't like Stossel's tone. He failed to be alarmist enough when talking about the environment. As far as these, quote, fact checkers over at Science Feedback are concerned, unless you're prepared to sound as hysterical as Greta Thunberg, you're not allowed to talk about the environment.
Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you!
Yeah, how dare you indeed. So these so-called fact checkers banned Stossel's reporting, depriving him of readers and revenue, and for no good discernible reason. And so Stossel dragged Facebook's butt to court and sued him for defamation, in that they blatantly lied about Stossel's reporting and content. So once in court, Facebook had a fascinating defense against the defamation accusation. Their fact checkers are in fact editorialists. As it turns out, according to Facebook's own sworn testimony, their fact checkers are expressions of mere opinion and therefore immune from defamation. Now, keep in mind, these so-called fact checkers are supposed to be all about disproving things, right? To disprove is to actually prove, but in this case, the proof is supposed objective demonstration on how something happens to be false. We're now being told by Facebook in a court of law that their fact checkers don't do anything of the sort. Fact checking is now admittedly mere opinion and is therefore, and this is key, it is therefore no more valid than the opinions expressed in any piece of information that's being supposedly disproved. In other words, Facebook's defense completely overturns the entire rationale for fact-checking, which is supposedly an objective standard for identifying so-called misinformation. It was an astonishing admission, but it was a long time coming. I don't know how many of you are familiar with actually the history of the fact, but it is rather interesting. I think it's very illuminating for what's happening here in terms of how far leftists over at Facebook have learned to weaponize the fact. And this is, they manipulate facts in favor of their own left-wing political agenda, right? But scholars have long recognized that there is a history to facts. In other words, when did we start using this term fact? When do we start asking questions like, well, is that a fact? Or claims such as, this is a fact, not mere opinion. Or just the facts, ma'am. When do we start talking that way? Well, according to scholars, relatively recently, as it turns out, we derive our notion of facticity from Europe during the 1820s and 30s, shortly after the French Revolution. And the idea here, it's interesting, is that the French overthrew the monarchy, they overthrew the church as the central governing institutions, but then they needed a new conception of knowledge to help govern society. And this is because both the priest and the king were considered up until that point to have been anointed with a special access to divine knowledge in order to rule rightly. Well, without those institutions that alone have access to that knowledge, French intellectuals looked elsewhere for a form of knowledge that was considered accessible to the masses. And voila! You've got the literal invention of the modern fact. Facts were considered to be a form of knowledge that required no ordination. They required no special skill set in order to be understood. Facts were just that. They were facts and anyone could understand them. And thus you had a basis for a common democratic form of knowledge that helped guide a democratic society. But what's so interesting here, and as we've been finding out with the mainstream media and big tech and technologists and the like, is that scholars are increasingly recognizing that what actually constitutes facts has been co-opted by a professional class of elites who claim, like these lefties over at Facebook, they claim that they alone have the competence to determine what is actually a fact and what is not. In other words, in the hands of technocrats and the mainstream media and big tech, the whole democratic notion of facts, the original conception that facts were available to everyone and thus contributed to a democratic society, that whole democratic notion of facts has collapsed. Facts are now the exclusive property of a so-called class of experts, of technocrats who alone supposedly have the competency to determine what is and what is not true, what is and what is not valid, what has and what has not been proven. In other words, our technocratic class of so-called experts have anointed themselves as de facto dictators over what is allowed to be called a fact. Now is it making sense what Anthony Fauci said of himself of late when he said, I am the science? Do you remember that? Apparently to Fauci, when you criticize him, you're criticizing science. When you doubt him, you're doubting scientific fact. That, my friends, is what we might call fact fascism. It's the notion that facts are indeed inseparable from a class of technocratic so-called experts who tell us what is indeed factive and what is not. And anyone who challenges them challenges reality. Needless to say, this fact fascism has turned into nothing less than the weaponization of facts, the redefinition of facts in accordance with the political goals of the permanent political class. The wonderful news is more and more people want nothing to do with this. They're seeing through the veneer of partisanized knowledge, and they're no longer intimidated to stand up against technocratic tyranny. And why should they be? With the recent admission of Facebook about their so-called fact checkers, the cat's out of the bag. The jig is up. Their days of defining knowledge for the rest of us are indeed coming to an end. And that's a fact. Now, before you go, you will definitely want to check out my latest video on the poll panic surrounding Biden, who has now collapsed to just 22% support. It's going to absolutely make your day. So make sure to click on the link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.